Imagine you're asking ChatGPT questions or things to do, but it has eyes. It can actually be looking at your world, and you could just be like, hey, I want you to look at this factory and tell me 10 ways I can improve my safety. I took it as a challenge to go and run this marathon. And as I was going through the last 6 miles, everything was hurting. It was about close to 95 degrees. In the last 6 miles, I was like, if I can push myself to do this, I'm going to tomorrow just go and start this company.
Alrighty, hello everyone and welcome to the Deal Maker Show. So today we have a really awesome founder, a founder that, has done it, a couple of times. Now he's riding this incredible momentum and hype, in the artificial intelligence world, AGIs, we're going to be talking about all of that good stuff. We're going to be talking about also moving to the US, thinking about building your network when coming here. I'm sure that there's a lot of you guys outside of the US wondering what happens when you get here and how you can make it happen. And again, all of that stuff, the building, the scaling, you name it. And without further ado, let's welcome our guest today, Rish Gupta. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Alejandro. Thank you for having me. Super excited.
So originally born in Delhi, in India. So give us a walk through memory lane. How was life growing up for you?
Life's, there's a movie version of Delhi that or India that you get to see in Slumdog Millionaire. And then there's a whole reality to it. It was like growing up probably in any other part of the world, where I grew up, we had a great childhood. I was very, very lucky that one of the best sporting facilities in the city was walking distance from my house. And it was like a massive sporting facility from everything from horse riding to swimming to tennis to squash to you name it. So most of my childhood was spent between going to our school, coming back home, being walked to the sporting facility and having just 1 hour of tennis training, 1 hour of swimming training, 1 hour of like horse riding, like everything, every sport under the sun. So that was most of my childhood. Apart from like, I was a math geek, so I did a bunch of math Olympiads and stuff like that.
How did you get into the, because it sounds like you did your undergrad, your schooling there. But it sounds like the entrepreneurial bug hit you, while you were in college and you did a couple of things on side hustles. So what happened there that really pushed you into the venture world?
I don't know how and when. And I think a lot of people who become entrepreneurial cannot really pinpoint a date. So from a very young age, I was very enamored by people who had built their own things, and it could be individuals who had built their own scientific theorems to people who had built companies to people who were in the late 90s really famous like Bill Gates or, Richard Branson and stuff. You'd read about these books and Howard Hughes from the US and Henry Ford, and you'll get really excited and enamored by them. So there was this, I don't know why, there was always this sense of excitement about how these people lived their lives and what they did. So in college, I did the most obvious business that I think anybody who's entrepreneurial kind of starts at least once in college, which is you think about, if I can gather all the cool things happening in and around college and make it into a newsletter, then local businesses will advertise on it and I can make money on it. So we tried doing that. Wasn't as easy. I think we published 2 editions, didn't really distribute it much. It was not successful. The other business, we were watching a movie one day with a friend of mine whose dad owned a very large network of buses, which went to rural parts of the country. Now, this was also the point in time, this was early 2000s or mid 2000s, when big American and European companies were making, especially consumer product goods. So think about all your Pepsis, Cokes, Heinz, Unilever, all these companies were making a big inroads into India. And they needed last mile distribution, marketing, etc. This parent's father had a large bus network. And we were watching a movie. The movie was based in New York. I forget the movie's name. But we saw a bus roll by in the movie with a banner ad on the side. And we were like, wait, we don't see banner ads on these buses. We have a whole bus network that we can leverage, which goes to all the interior parts of the country. So as 19-year-old kids, we decided to go talk to his dad, actually get a carpenter, put up some banners on side of 3 buses, took some pictures, got meetings with some of the biggest, largest consumer product companies and pitched them the idea of advertising on these buses, and they were sold. Then we built a radio station, like not a radio station, but basically a cassette recorded thing on the bus speakers so that they can again have audio ads playing on them in between music. yeah, that was just a profitable business. It was not a super scalable business, or we didn't really know how to do advertising, but we had an asset which we could go and advertise, and we were able to go and sell it to companies, and companies bought it. I think we made a couple of million rupees within the first 6 months or something.
That was a good push then, and obviously that was ultimately what led you into getting started with letsintern.com, which ended up getting, a nice outcome.
Thing in entrepreneurship is find problems around you and then think about how to solve them. So one of the problems when we were in college, even the best of colleges in India do not have a culture of internships, or did not have a culture of internships 15 years ago. So which meant people went to undergrad, graduated all of their undergrad education without ever having worked with a company. So the real world and the textbook world is very, very disparate. So we started because I was doing these side hustles. I was looking for internships while I was in college. We ended up working and doing lots of random stuff while in college. And all our friends would be like, this is really cool. How do we get access to it? I think I was lucky to have a really good friend network. Plus, my parents had a lot of good access, which we were able to leverage to get a lot of these opportunities for ourselves. So that we were like, everybody we know in college wants to do these things, and there is not a single platform to do it. So we started basically building a platform which we thought our friends could use, and then we kept building it. And it was a lot of fun. It is a classic. I think everybody in the company was between 20 and 25-year-old. Nobody knew how to do anything. We were all in our first jobs, figuring out anything from sales, marketing, etc. by ourselves. Had to do a lot of side hustles to kind of get that business off the ground.
And one thing that is interesting is that you started, the idea of the whole company was when you were also thinking about doing a marathon. That's quite something to do in parallel, no?
Yeah. So basically, I was very, very, I wanted to start this company, but I was very nervous because, yeah, you're very young, and you're like, all your friends are going and getting consulting jobs and banking jobs and earning good money, and you're like, I have no experience. My parents didn't have their own businesses. So I was like, can I really go and create a full-time job out of running my own business rather than just a side hustle? And I didn't have the confidence. And I had person I knew who was 20 years older than me, who was about somewhere in his 40s at that point, and he was running a marathon. And he told me he's running a marathon. And I'm like, what is that? He said, oh, it's 26 miles. And I'm like, okay, I want to do it. And it was 4 weeks away, and I was not a runner in school. I was a soccer player, and I was very active. So I took it as a challenge to go and run this marathon. And as you can imagine, in 4 weeks of training, was somebody who's not a runner, it was very, very painful on the day off. And as I was going through the last 6 miles, everything was hurting. It was torturous. It was a hot day in Bombay. I ran this marathon in Bombay. It was about close to 95 degrees when we were running. And in the last 6 miles, I was like, if I can push myself to do this, I'm going to tomorrow just go and start this company. Like, if I can find the courage to do this, it was just, I don't know what it was, but in those last 6 torturous miles, which took about an hour to run, there was a decision made that if I can finish this, I'm going to tomorrow have the courage to back myself. So I took my mom out for dinner the next day, told her that this is what I want to pursue for the next couple of years. Yeah.
What's in it, in marathons? Why is there so many entrepreneurs that are into marathons? What similarities do you find, between a marathon and then also starting and building and scaling and exiting a company?
I think you have to love pain. If you're not masochistic enough, and you've been through this, like there are so much simpler and easier ways to live life and paths to make easy money in different. But I think if you're choosing to be an entrepreneur, starting something new, you're basically accepting a path of a lot of rejection, a lot of failures, a lot of self-doubt, a lot of dark days. So yeah, I think you have to enjoy a certain amount of pain. So that's what a lot of us do: marathons, triathlons, and anything which is masochistic.
This company, I mean, you guys ended up building letsintern.com to 4 million plus, users. I mean, that's quite an impact. But I'm sure that, for you guys, at the beginning, given that you guys were still like young and one of the first rodeos here, I'm sure that really figuring out the whole customers and thing, the profile, the value proposition, and perhaps even more the business model, how to monetize, that was quite the tricky, aspect here.
The business model was the hardest part to figure out, because how to get students onboarded was easy. We knew a lot of people in colleges. We had a very vast network of friends, and we were very well networked. So finding the right students in the right colleges who could spread the word was easy for us. Very early on, we also realized that students are not going to come to the platform for just because we built it. They're going to come because we have cool companies there. So we made it a point to figure out everything from, like, we just basically made a list of 100 aspirational companies and figured out a way to get inroads into them and be like, post your internships here for free or post student jobs here for free. Fresh people who are just graduating undergrad, their first jobs postings here for free. So, and then you could go back to colleges and say, hey, we have all these amazing companies posting on our side. You don't want to miss out. And in the beginning, we built a very simple two web pages where companies could post and students could post, and we didn't have enough resources or the time to go build a matching engine. So all the matching happened at night ourselves. So we would, we were young, we would open a beer and then we'd sit through all the students who applied, all the people who have created applications, and we're like, okay, let's start matching them. So for the first few months, the matching was all manual. That kind of created the flywheel to get more students, to get more companies. And for the first 6 months, it's kind of we had not read Paul Graham's essays then, but we were doing everything which didn't scale. So there was no automation. Like, apart from the web, people could come and post their profiles and jobs. All the matchmaking was manual. Every week and at Friday, we would send emails to the entire database of students we had, like, which ended up being thousands in the early days. We would send them emails manually on, hey, these are the new job postings that have come. Are you interested? We'd not figured out, I don't know if MailChimp had come to India. We had not figured that out. Gmail had a limit of 20 emails you could send to addresses, after which it starts putting you in spam folders. So I remember we would have 2,000 people. So that meant 100 emails to be sent, manually copy pasted and we would do that like over 2-3 hours on a Friday evening. That was like, before we go out on Friday from 6 to 9, we just have beers and just crank out manual emails to the entire database. But yeah, we did a lot of crazy, stupid things. We then realized that, we figured out a way where students were paying us to market them. So we realized students want to hear from top companies. So we organized a career workshop in one of the best engineering institutes, IIT in Delhi. And we got Franklin Covey, Microsoft, HP, like a bunch of companies to agree to come and participate in them as speakers and bring speakers from these companies. And actually we charge students a small fees to attend this workshop. And that allowed us to basically have money to market to students back. So we would just do things like this, which was like $0 marketing, or in fact, sometimes revenue positive marketing. But yeah.
So eventually the company got acquired in 2015.
Yeah, 2015.
So pretty amazing that, first formal official rodeo, into the entrepreneurial world, has a nice outcome. I guess, what would you say that, what kind of visibility did that give you? With this is the whole cycle. This is how it's done. What kind of visibility did that give you?
It teaches you a lot of things, but the biggest thing it taught me, which I didn't realize 2 years after selling the company, was the first journey. And anybody who's been on an entrepreneurial journey probably has felt some version of this, is you have the highest highs and the lowest lows. So there'll be weeks where we'd feel like, oh, this is going really well. We're going to crush it. We're going to make it. And there are weeks we'd feel, oh, I'm the stupidest person on planet Earth. We're just doing really dumb things. We're never going to make it. This company is going to go bury itself into the ground. And you would go through these really high emotional cycles, and if you're the CEO and you're the co-founder, that your emotional cycles affects everybody else in the company. And I didn't have a good understanding of that. I think I would let my emotions get the better of me, both on the highs, sometimes get really excited and then take big swings, and sometimes I'll get really low and depressed. I think coming out of it, you realize that your highest highs does not always come true, and your lowest lows never also come true. Like, it's all in your head, and how do you kind of manage the emotional temporal? So that to me was the biggest part. Yes, you learn a little bit of sales, you learn a little bit of marketing and hiring and all the good stuff. But I think the biggest enemy and the friend is our brain. And when it's firing well, it's great. But when it's telling us stories which are depressing or negative, it is our worst enemy. And how to manage that, I think, was the biggest. And knowing that you can have 3 bad weeks or 3 bad months or 1 bad quarter or 2 bad quarters does not mean anything. If you're trying to build a long company, you can keep your head in the game and come out of it.
So for you, eventually, you decided to come out to the U.S.
Yeah.
So basically, how was the experience of coming to the U.S.? Why did you come to the U.S.? And then also, how did you figure out, your ways around being able to build your network and surround yourself by the right people?
Yeah, I think the US was challenging in a way that I think is counterintuitive to most people. I was very lucky that on a couple, so US was the reason I came to the US when we were building Let's Intern in India. Everything we were reading and learning about building a company came from, I think, YC essays, Paul Graham, and everything being all the blogs being published here, all the articles coming out of the valley. So it became very clear that we were learning everything from San Francisco. It's like, okay, if I want to build another company, this seems to be the mecca. It's the Paris of the Renaissance, like we Paris of the 1920s and Florence of the Renaissance. Like we wanted to be moved, so it became very clear that I wanted to move here. Moving here was difficult in two dimensions, which is counterintuitive for me at least. I think I grew up speaking English as my native language. I went to completely English speaking schools and private schools, and so language, culture, read the same books, watched the same movies, heard the same songs. So culture integration, same books, movies, like none of that was a problem. That was the easier part. The difficult part was realizing that you do not have any inbuilt social networks in the country. You don't have a family that you can depend on their network. You don't have a set of high school friends whose network you can depend on. You don't have a set of college friends. You don't have, if you meet somebody at a party and they say they're from Wisconsin, you don't know how to relate to that person. But if they were from your country and somebody said a random city, you would know 5 things about that city to talk to them about. And now you're like, where is Wisconsin on the map? Like, how do I connect to this person? They would say, so it was suddenly taken from a position of in your own country where you feel you know everyone, you have access to a lot of networks, you have a lot of power structures helping you, to completely being stripped out of it and being like, okay, I'm by myself and I don't have any known power structures or privileges or access tools that I can use to navigate the social ecosystem around me. That was really hard. And the second thing is, and this is, I think, any entrepreneur who's moved here from outside, US, by and large, unless you built like $1 billion company outside or a really massive company, by and large, US cares about what you did in the US ecosystem. So if you built a company somewhere else, you discarded a couple of points, versus somebody had built the same company in the US will be given access to more networks, etc. So that was the second thing. I would write emails to people saying, hey, I built this company, did this and sold this, and I would love a meeting with you. And I would just drop blanks, a 95% like no-show ratio. Yeah. So for me, I started thinking through how do you get access to these networks? How do you get with the right people? And it became either you join a company which is really well regarded, you join a Stripe, you join a Dropbox, you join a Google or something in a good part of Google, and that prestige or that set of people become kind of your default network to spread the nodes from, because you need the first 5-10. Or you go join a Harvard, Stanford, like pick a top university and do. I ended up taking the second route because I didn't really want to work for someone else at that point. And then, Stanford ended up being a great environment, meet great people, build a network, build friendships. And also that I wrote email to the same set of people with the same email copy, except now from a stanford.edu address. And my response rate went from 5% to 90%.
Wow.
And it's amazing like how much credentials people give to these things, which is you're the same person, you just got admitted to a school. Nothing about your life experience has changed. You didn't change as a human being at all. But now suddenly people would meet you for coffee and talk to you and be serious about you and tell you that they want to invest in you. And yeah.
That's amazing. Obviously, for you, too, Stanford gave you the opportunity of meeting your co-founder, so that was great.
Yeah.
And in your case, what you decided to do was, instead of starting your next gig right out of Stanford, you decided to work for another company. In this case, it was Samsara, which we've had the founder also on the podcast
Yeah.
for those that want to listen to it. And then from there, you went at it with Spot AI. So what were the sequence of events that needed to happen for you to really feel that confidence level again, to really go at it again?
Yeah. I'll give a couple of concepts here because I think there's a convergence of things that happen. So one was by the end of first year at Stanford, I got really convinced that I want to play at the intersection of hardware and software. And the reason was 2016, Stanford, if you were on campus, there were a couple of big things. Every student was trying to build an app. Snapchat had gotten big a few years ago from a college. Instagram had gotten really, really big and was still on the up and up. And Uber would start to become center stage. A lot of apps had become center stage over the last few years. So 90%, 95% of the students were trying to build the next app, right? And that data point alone made me want to not build the next app. And I'm like, okay, there's the smartest set of people around me, all trying to do this one thing. We don't need to find gold somewhere else. And the general logic was there were three kind of systems that you could build on top of. You could build on top of the operating systems of these app stores. You can do something with mobile, the number, and or you can do something you could do something on the desktop level. So to me, the number of laptops being sold or the PCs being sold was static. Mobile phones had maxed out. An average person has about 60 apps on his phone or her phone, and they only update one or two new apps a year. So you're fighting for one or two spots out of the 10 million apps that are going to get released that year, which is a very bad odd. But what was another thing that was happening was Alexa was starting to become a thing. Suddenly, a lot of connected sensors, Bluetooth lights in your home, Philips Bluetooth lights, and a lot of these things had started to come. And I was like, oh, this is going to be next computing paradigm where there's going to be chips and sensors in everything around us, whether you're a physical factory or a home, and building computing platforms on top of that could be really, really valuable. So that became a kind of a growing thesis, started diving a lot more deeper into that. Then I realized I knew nothing about hardware. And everybody I spoke to who had worked at amazing companies like Nest and all the other kind of big companies and found people to speak with, and they're like, don't do hardware. It's really, really hard. And every time I heard it's really, really hard, it just made me want to do it more. So then I started looking at it. I said, I need to learn hardware. It's not as simple as just you on your computer working on a bunch of code and you'll figure out some solution to it. There's a whole supply chain. There's a whole different aspect to it. There's a longer iteration cycle. So that decided to join. I started looking at companies, started talking to people, saying which companies are early stage and doing really, really well. Samsara was one of those at that point. I think they were Series B or something. Reached out pretty much to one of the early team members, one of the founding members, saying that, hey, I want to work with you guys. I'm willing to do any role you want me to do. I just want to be a part of the team. And then ended up working on leading a product line for them. And and that helped at Spot a lot because a lot of the learnings helped at Spot. Today, 10% of Spot has come from Samsara. So and Sanjit, who's the CEO of Samsara, was a great person to learn from. And I still call him once in a while to get some advice. And this is fantastic.
So what was that day when you were like, okay, let's go?
So the Spot journey for me is a very twisted entrepreneurial journey. So my two co-founders, they had initially thought of the idea of Spot while we were graduating. I wanted to go work for Samsara. And I said, I'm going to start something, but in a year and a half from now. I ended up investing in these two guys. And I went and did Samsara. We were always in touch. That journey, after a year, the product hadn't really taken off, zero revenue, zero product. We were still trading in the garage. And that's the time I was starting to come out and start to think about ideas. So Tanuj, who was one of the co-founders, was like, hey, why are you trying to do something on your own? Like, we've been talking for a year. We all know each other really well. Just come and do Spot with us, and we'll just redo the cap table to have all of us as co-founders. So we started rebuilding the product towards the end of 2019, started selling the product early 2020. So I went from being an early angel investor. After a year, the company was still at the zero stage or still at the kind of ideation stage, and I ended up joining them as a co-founder.
That's amazing. So I guess for the people that are listening right now, to really get it, what ended up being the business model of Spot AI? How do you guys make money?
We make money with a very simple thing. You have about 100 million cameras deployed across US businesses. And we want to make these cameras valuable. So we charge companies a single subscription fee, which is on the number of feeds that processes through our system. So if you're a company with 500 cameras deployed across its manufacturing floor, you're going to pay us a monthly subscription fee for those 500 feeds. So instead of a typical SaaS company's number of seats into a subscription revenue, think of it as number of camera feeds that go through us into a subscription revenue. And to give you an idea of scale, like we have today, because these cameras stream 24/7. So today on a daily basis, in terms of net new video being uploaded onto our servers is twice as much as net new video being uploaded to YouTube every day. That's the amount of video data we're processing. And it's all about the physical world, which is making it really exciting. And so the company journey has gone in the very early days. where it was about how do you create great software to work across all these different camera brands, which can give them access and basic intelligence, to then being how much more data we can mine. And then in the last year, it has gone to how can we actually make them these cameras into your extra teammates. So what is your safety manager doing? Can a network of cameras do the job, do half of their job, and help them work on higher level priorities? Same thing in operations, same thing on security, and it's the AI curve is making now those cameras so much more useful. Another way we think about it is now think of all the agentic software or the large language models you're seeing on the digital world. So Chat GPT. Imagine you're asking Chat GPT questions or things to do, but it has eyes. It can actually be looking at your world, and you could just be like, "Hey, I want you to look at this factory and tell me 10 ways I can improve my safety." And there's a network of cameras which can just answer you that, create a report for that, create a daily score for that. Like there's tons of things now you can do.
And in your case, how do you go from a non-CEO role to a CEO role? What was that transition like too?
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is, being all three of us are very close, and have been very integral in kind of building every part of the company. So taking my co-founder Chinuj, who was the CEO, had some family health emergencies, which is why he needed to step back. And at that point, I had built the product and engineering function. I had led sales in between when we were in between a sales leadership transition. I had built a customer success support. So I'd literally led or built from ground up every department in the company. So the transition at that point of the CEO wasn't any different. I think the difference between a non-CEO co-founder and a CEO co-founder is the you have to sometimes make decisions that your co-founder disagrees with, and you have to bring them along still. And that's, I think, the biggest kind of skill that you have to master to make sure that your co-founder is still bought in.
Now, in your guys' case, talking about people, you guys have raised quite a bit of money too. How much money have you guys raised, and what has been the journey of raising that money as well?
Yeah, we've raised about $93 million till date. The journey of raising that money has been, I mean, it has gone through the venture kind of curve. So if anybody who's listening to this, or anybody in the entrepreneurial ecosystem whose company was kind of getting built or taking off in 2020, 2021, all the way to maybe early parts of 2022, money was easy. So the early parts of fundraising for the first half of the company felt like we were constantly being chased, right? There was always a VC willing to give a higher multiple. It is all preemptive rounds. We never had to decide to go out and raise. We would just be like, oh yeah, we had 2 good quarters. Somebody will come and be like, yeah, you guys should just get another 10, 20, 15, whatever number it was back then. So the early part of it felt a lot more, it was, we were part of the early kind of that venture cycle where the cash was the zero interest rate phenomena. Cash was easier, deal values were higher. And the last couple of rounds, it's also to do with the scale of the company as we've gotten bigger. The last couple of rounds are more led by, especially the last one, was more led by not just the hype cycle, not just there's a lot of surplus in the ecosystem. It is led by, okay, what is the growth rate? What are the metrics? What is the efficiency of your every dollar that you bring in? What's the future? Like, it's a lot more data driven and metric driven.
So then now, I guess the whole world, of AI, and AGIs and all of that stuff is there's much more hyped than when you got started in 2018 or
Yeah.
so. So
Yeah.
how do you think, being at the right time in history has helped you guys with the execution here?
I still feel for, a lot of the hype around AI today, 2 years ago was in the model layer. A lot of the VCs would go on and say, oh, everything's going to be built by the model layer. Like the application layer for AI may not exist because the compute requirements are going to be so high. Obviously, that narrative has drastically shifted in the last, especially 6 months and more so in the 18 months. Then you had the voice and text-based AI applications. So you see Sierras and a bunch of others, and then you see a bunch of text-based applications, whether it's Glean or a bunch of others. And then you have kind of the automation layer, which is on engineering, where you see Cursor and a few others, and then you see the robotics layer. I think the video layer is still in its infancy. So to me, like the thing that excites us most is we built a really solid customer base of 1,000 plus customers, a really good business model, build a really great technology stack. And I think the video inflection is going to happen over the next 18 months. And because the context windows are getting bigger. The models can actually process more videos with less amount of this thing because you have to do it at the edge. You can't do it on the cloud, unlike typical applications. So all of that is coming converging. So to me, like the next 2 years is going to be incredibly exciting. And yes, and I do feel grateful that after 5 years of building this company, we just feel like we could be at the most profound moment of this company's journey at the right place with the right set of technologies inflecting with enough scale that we can actually exploit that opportunity with enough capital to exploit it. So yeah, incredibly lucky, but I still feel it's not, for us at least, it's not in the rearview mirror or right in, it is kind of just ahead of us.
So you're talking there of where things are heading, and obviously we were talking earlier about the $93 million that you guys have raised. I guess in that regard, if you were to go to sleep tonight and
Yeah.
you wake up in a world, Rish, where the vision of Spot AI is fully realized, what does that world look like?
The vision of Spot has always been to make video data extremely useful. And with the future world, the vision of Spot is realized is basically you're able to use these cameras, which is like the eyes to the AI, to not only automate all the kind of inspection compliance work that happens in the world, but you're actually able to use these eyes to actually control things in the physical world, whether it's machine telemetry, whether it's robotic arms, whether it's gates and sensors and other, other kind of devices on the floor. That is it is this automated layer where you're using these eyes to actually do the work and not just give you data insights on a chart, nice looking graph or report, etc. So we would expect, companies are able to operate incredibly more safe, drastically reduced accidents, drastically reduced security incidents. People can operate their labor shortage problems. Like you can produce a lot more with a lot more limited labor, and especially with manufacturing, a lot of manufacturing coming back to the US, or at least the tariff push kind of pushing some people to think about that. There's an incredible labor shortage. To be able to address that and actually make our labor so much more productive, like those are the kind of things that gets us excited. And I don't think it'll be, oh, it's done and we're going to bed. It's like, okay, we are actually making a significant difference where we can say we in this factory we're able to improve productivity by 10% and safety by 50%. And then it's like, okay, how do we push the boundary to the next level and the next level?
Now, imagine I put you into a time machine. Okay, so
Yeah.
we're talking about the future, but I want to talk about the past and doing so with a lens of reflection. I put you into a time machine and I bring you back to your college days, man, when you're like now starting with your two gigs, as you were mentioning, one that worked, one that didn't work so well. But let's say you are able to just show up right now and be able to have that younger Rish. And you're able to give that younger Rish one piece of advice before launching a business. What would that be and why, given what you know now?
Yeah, I think simplest advice, which I keep reminding myself even today, is don't measure yourself on the outcomes and don't worry about it and just genuinely follow curiosity and what do you think is right. Uh, so many times you can do all the right things and you can still have a bad quarter. You can do all the wrong things and you can still have a great quarter. And when bad outcomes happen, at least the younger me would get really dissuaded and then be in my head and then take bad decisions. Versus it's like we're going to go and build cool things because we want to build cool things and we want to add value. And if you keep doing the right things, there'll be quarters which will be bumpy, there'll be quarters which will be great, but trajectory will be in the right direction.
I love it. Well, Rich, thank you so much for being on the Dealmaker Show today. It has been an absolute honor to have you with us.
Alejandro, I'm so honored that you had me here, and then I enjoyed the conversation. Thank you so much.